Hi everybody, I hope you are all well. It's been 2 weeks since my last video, and as I explained in my last video, I'm actually currently on annual leave from work. So when you see this video, I am filming this on Sunday morning, just as I tend to film my videos on a Sunday, but I'm going to upload it at my mum and dad's house tomorrow, because tomorrow is the last day of my holiday and they have got mega fast broadband speed, so I'm just going to take my laptop to my mum and dad's house and upload this video. So you'll be seeing this on Monday, but I'm actually filming this on Sunday. I am having such a good time off work. So 2 weeks ago, Monday to Thursday, I was working, and I've been off since that Friday. And then, as I said, I go back to work on the 13th, which is Tuesday. I've had such a good time off. I desperately needed the break from work, and I have been getting so much rest. I've been spending so much time with my mum and dad, which has been great. Been like making soup and cake and watching Netflix, and I've actually planned all my Christmas shopping. I know, crazy, absolutely mental. And also it's the Cheltenham Literature Festival at the moment, which you guys know I like religiously go to every year. But this year is different because obviously because of COVID, you kind of had three options available to you this year at the Literature Festival. One is still attend events, and I decided that I didn't want to do that personally because of where I live and such. I have to use public transport and eat out and such throughout the days and that at the Literature Festival, which I have done for years. And because of the whole COVID situation, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to choose a different option this year. So that was option one. Option two was to sign up for free for the live feeds that they've been showing, which is recordings every hour from when the festival opens today to when it closes. And that is totally for free. Or you could do option three, which is what I went for, which is you get the live feed and also access to their archive, which you pay £20 for. And that £20 means you get to see all of the 130 recorded events that they did throughout the festival. And you have access to those videos for 2 months. So that's what I've been doing. I've been spending like all day with my mum, my dad, and then spending my evenings maybe watching one or two events, and I've got 130 of them to go through over 2 months. I don't know if you can sign up for it now. Today is the last day of the festival, and yeah, I've had a really good time just relaxing stuff. And I've been getting addicted to watching The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor. So both of those I hadn't watched before at all. I know I'm 2 years behind the times for The Haunting of Hill House, but I'm like that with loads of stuff. I get recommended loads of stuff and I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. And it's because I've got this backlog. So it took me, nearly 5 years to get to Outlander, 3 years to get to The Crown, and 2 years to get to The Haunting of Hill House. But because I watched the Haunting of Hill House first time round, it terrified the heck out of me, and I don't usually get terrified by stuff. I watched it again because I needed to watch it after knowing what I know from watching it the first time. I didn't find it scary the second time. I was more in my usual analyst kind of brain, and the writing was exquisite. And it just happened that right after I finished watching Hill House for the second time, literally that day, Bly Manor was released. So I spent yesterday just watching it in one big block, and I really enjoyed it. Compared to Hill House is better. Hill House is like a 10 out of 10. Bly Manor is probably about an 8. But I'm going to watch it a second time round again, just as I did with Hill House, to look at it more in my analyst brain now that I know what I know. But it was structured totally different, but it was still very clever. And the first series is loosely, and I'm using this loosely, based on The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and series 2 is loosely based on The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which I have a copy of upstairs. It was in my Christmas haul for 2019, and yeah, I got it because I wanted to reread it before I watch the new Hollywood film called The Screw, which as far as I know has been delayed, or I don't know if it's just been shelved. I don't know, because of the whole COVID situation. But that's so if you want to watch either of them, I recommend. I'll put a link to them down below. But anyway, 5 minutes in and I've not even got to what this video is about. So this video is about the book I've been reading over the past 2 weeks, which I finished this morning, which is Skagboys by Irvine Welsh, the prequel to Trainspotting. I read Trainspotting, I think it was last year. And I had seen the film when I turned 18, so it was about when was that? 2001. It was early. No. Hang on, get my brain right. I'm getting the date that it was released muddled up in my head. We went how old I was. So 2004. Sorry, So mid 2004 2005 was when I watched it, and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is mental. But I really liked it, and over the years I've kind of gone back to it, and then they brought out T2, which I just went straight to cinema to see, like on the opening weekend, because I was like, I've got to see this. I was by far the youngest in the audience. It was crazy. And yeah, I really liked that, and I bought, because I went through an Irvine Welsh, because I read Filth. I bought another one of his, the title of which I can't remember. I bought Trainspotting T2, which is also known as Porno, and Skagboys, and I also bought another Irvine Welsh in my 2019 book haul. So that's my history with Irvine Welsh. So I read Trainspotting and Filth before reading this. So this is only my third Irvine Welsh book. And the thing about this book, I loved this quote that I read. Irvine Welsh said, the reason why he wrote this book was that there were elements of the story which was from Trainspotting which had to be cut out, or it didn't quite work, it didn't quite fit, and he kind of got this thought in his head, like, what if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and die, and somebody goes through all of my papers and publishes this collection of stuff with no context as to what it is. I don't want someone meddling with my world, so I better write it myself. That's kind of what it was. So he wrote this in, I think it was 2012. So it was quite a significant amount of time compared to when he wrote Trainspotting, which was in probably about 92, 93 time. So yeah. So it's quite a significant amount of time, and this is the build up to Trainspotting. So this is where we meet all the main characters when they are in their sort of early 20s, and when you in Trainspotting they're sort of in their mid 20s. So the amount of time story-wise or timeline-wise for their characters, it's not that far apart, a few years, but in publishing wise it's been a significant amount of time, and I didn't really know what to expect from this book whatsoever. I kind of like to go in, especially with Irvine Welsh, because you never quite know what's going to happen in any given moment. It kind of makes it feel like watching Haunting Hill House and Bly Manor. You don't know when the scare is, suddenly your ghost is going to pop out and scream in front of your face. Just like that, you really don't know what's around the corner in any given moment of an Irvine Welsh book. And I didn't want to be spoiled. I don't like to be spoiled about books that I'm going to read and such. So I really didn't know what to expect, and I found it so fascinating at the choices to show how these different characters end up where they end up. And his opening chapter kind of took me straight back into the world of these characters, because I did have a concern that, is it going to be that because this is pre-heroin addiction and we know these characters really sustained within their heroin addiction, if there would be difference in their characteristics, if their situation would be vastly different, and we wonder how the hell did you get go from this high to this low sort of thing. But as soon as I read that opening chapter, I was like, right, we're back. I didn't have to worry. I was able to go straight back into that world, and the fact that it opens with a diary excerpt of Mark Renton, our lead character, aka Hugh McGregor in the film. He is talking about a day out with his dad, and you don't necessarily understand exactly what's going on, because he's talking about growing up as a kid and seeing these various relatives and trying a cigarette for the first time and having a drink for the first time and all this lot. And then the next thing you know, you realise it's 1984 and his father is taking him to the coal mines for the picket lines. And it's like, right, okay. So we're in 1984. We've got the whole coal mining stuff that was going on, crazy politics relating to that and other things going on in the 1980s. We've got the HIV and AIDS kind of epidemic that started up around that time, or it already started about that time. I can't remember exactly when first cases came in, as it were, of the disease. You've got issues with people losing jobs left, right, and centre. There was a whole uproar to do with universities and all this lot, and so to land us straight in the middle in a coal mine picket line with police kicking the shit out of people, it was just like, Irvine, like, very, very clever way to take us back to this location, and very, very powerful opening. So where are our characters at the moment? So the majority of this book, I have to say, or the bulk of this book, is actually told through Spud. Spud is kind of like the tag-along best friend who people don't like to acknowledge he's a friend. Not to say he's a bad guy, because he's not. He is a genuinely good person. He just found himself lost one day, and he took a bit of heroin just to kind of, in a way, perk him up, make him feel a bit better, and that led him on the downward spiral of heroin addiction. And he kind of reminds me of, even though he's not got the same personality whatsoever as this character, he kind of reminds me of how Peter Pettigrew from the Harry Potter books, in that he's like that tag-along friend, but he is actually really, really important. He doesn't do anything bad or evil to anyone, but he is important, going forward and such. And to have him be the lead, as it were, of this book, I found really interesting. Spud has been let off from work. He's caught up in the whole industry breakdowns and such to do with, in the 1980s, like I said, picket lines and all that lot. He is caught up directly in that. Mark Renton, he is at university. He's got a girlfriend. He's feeling pretty good, as it were, in his world, but yet he's finding himself struggling. He's finding the issues that right, with his parents. They kind of go, right, this is the time you have to go to university before the government fuck you over, basically. This is the time to establish yourself in a good family and with the industries and everything that's going on. You have to do bang, 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 bang now. And Mark's kind of going, well, what if I don't want that? What if I want to do something else? And so he's struggling of carrying this weight of stuff that he's been told that he should be doing, that he has to do, dealing with university, dealing with a girlfriend. And in the back of his mind, he's going, I don't want this. I don't know why. I can't do this. And what that then leads to with heroin. And Sick Boy, his like best friend, is able to ride the wave. He's like doing like petty crimes and stuff like this, but he's one who, it kind of feels like, with that quicksand or something that you see in like quicksand, with people on beaches and such. And it's that I've seen that thing where it's kind of like if you stand still, then obviously you will sink into it. But if you actually step, like this, so that you're constantly moving around, it doesn't allow your boots to actually get caught up and therefore sink you down. So I kind of feel like that's what Sick Boy does. He's able to deal with any situation because he doesn't emotionally attach. He doesn't feel that anything is vital, as it were. He's able to just plot around, and he is able to ride the wave of anything, and that's kind of how he is throughout this book. And the fact that Mark is getting slowly and slowly pulled down and such with everything, and a family situation kind of puts more weight on him. It kind of feels like he's always looking to stick as Sick Boy as this kind of this figure of what he should be going for, as it were. And it just so happens that that involves drugs. But what I do like, especially, is at the beginning of this book, and it makes it very clear that when they go on their nights out and they get offered heroin, they say no, straight off, no, not taking that, because they know that it's an addictive drug, and they want to not be involved with that. But once certain triggers are hit and certain events happen, that changes for each of them. And I find it so interesting the way in which he shows that people, even though they're all from Leith, they're all caught up in the same political situation, it's for very different reasons that they take the drugs. And I absolutely love the trip to London. So there is a section of this book that goes to London, and doing some research into Irvine Welsh, because I had done it before, but when I read Trainspotting, but because that was so long ago, I'm like, I'm going to have to research them again. Because I remember bits of things, but I couldn't remember exactly. There was this whole part of Irvine's life where he, in 1978, in his mid-20s, he ran off to London from Scotland to be involved with to be on the punk music scene and play guitar. And it's like, reading this is like, no, that's very autobiographical, isn't it? But there are other moments in this where it feels so much more personal than Trainspotting. I'm not saying Trainspotting wasn't personal at all, because it was, but it almost feels like there is a bit of a detachment, as it were, between a reality of Irvine Welsh has done those things, felt those things, or I've done those things, felt those things, and the characters. Whereas this one, when he talks about the ride to London, when he talks about people encounters, when he talks about the things that he saw in London, it feels stronger. It feels more personal. It feels harsher. It feels a greater impact. So that's why I feel like this is a lot more personal. This is a lot more of Irvine himself, putting his thoughts and feelings and emotions and sights of what he actually saw in that time into this book. And that made it all the more stirring, all the more powerful. I mean, there are, just as in any Irvine Welsh books, there are some truly, truly dark moments in this, including rape. And it is, I will say, I think the thing with Irvine Welsh's books is that he is brutal. So straight away you kind of get like a trigger warning, as it were, with any of his books, because of how dark he goes, but it's for a purpose. And again, with this book, especially with rape and such like that, it is for a purpose. So I understand why he wrote that, why that kind of that stuff happens, but I would warn anyone that I think Skagboys is actually more triggering than Trainspotting for certain particular elements. So I just wanted to flag that up. So I'm like 20 minutes into this review and I haven't actually done a reading yet. How very bad of me. So I'm going to do a reading from a chapter called Skin and Bone. And this is actually a rare chapter in the book. So that's why I decided to read this one. And this is one, well, I say rare, well, it's not that rare, but in comparison to the rest of the book, in comparison to Trainspotting and other Irvine Welsh books that I've read, it is a case of that we are in third person, and this is actually the parents' perspective, Mark's parents' perspective on what is going on with their son. All they know is that their son has gone to London. They don't know anything that's happening in London. They just know that Mark's in London with Skagboys, and this is a conversation between Mark's parents. So their names are Kathy and Davy, and they have a son who's Davy Jr. So some of the times it's referred to as Davy Senior in this chapter, just to have that distinction between the two characters. Okay, so here we go. At the kitchen table, Kathy Renton silently gaped into space, smoking her cigarette, occasionally pretending to read the Radio Times. Her husband Davy could hear his own breath, heavy with fatigue and stress, over the bubbling pot of stovies on the hob. Time seemed to hesitate, as frail and weary as either of them. Davy found the burden of his wife's silence even more heartbreaking in its insidious levelling way than her sobs and tortured soliloquies. Standing in the doorway, letting his fingers pick at the paint on the frame, he considered just how much they had all interacted through wee Davy, so wee Davy being their son. Now he was gone, and Billy, idle and unsettled in civilian life since his army discharge, was in bother with the police. And as for Mark, well, he didn't even want to think about what he was up to down in London. His middle son had become a stranger to him. As a kid, he had seen that Mark, studious, obliging, and with a cognate serenity, was the one who embodied the preeminent qualities of both he and Kathy. But a contrary willful streak was always apparent. While lacking Billy's upfront aggression, a cooler aspect was often visible in Mark. He was odd with wee Davy, seeming repelled and fascinated by him in equal measures. With adolescence onslaught, his secretive nature had acquired an underhanded, calculating feel. Davy Renton optimistically believed that we all hit a point in life where we strive to become the best possible version of ourselves. Neither of his remaining sons had gotten to that junction yet. He hoped that by the time they did, they hadn't ventured too far down the wrong track to get back. It wasn't that he didn't understand the respective angers of Billy and Mark. The problem was that he understood them only too well. It was Kathy's love, he thought, watching the blue smoke rising from the tip of her cigarette, that had been his own get-out-of-jail-free card. Dismayed to see a pile of filthy dishes soaking in the sink's cold, stagnant water, Davy moved over, busying himself on them, his Brillo pad rasping against the stubborn waste encrusted onto china and aluminium. Then he felt something he hadn't for a long time, his wife's arms wrapped around his expanding waist. "Sorry," she breathed softly into his shoulder. I'll sort them out." "It takes time, Kathy, I know," he said, his fingers tracing a vein on the back of her hand, which he pressed as if to urge her to continue talking. "It's just," she hesitated, "with Billy getting into bother and Mark being away in London." Davy turned round, breaking her grip, but only to take Kathy in his own arms. He stared into her big, haunting eyes, the light from the window revealing some new lines in her face and some of the older ones cutting a little deeper. He pulled her head into his chest, not just to comfort her, but because this sudden confrontation with her mortality was too much for him to endure. "What's wrong, love?" "When I was down at the church the other day, lighting a candle for wee Davy." David Renton Sr. forced himself not to roll his eyes or unleash an exasperating breath. his habitual response when he learnt that his wife had been at St. Mary's. Cathy raised her head, digging her sharp chin into his collarbone. Her body felt so slight against him. I saw the laddie Murphy there. She coughed, wriggled free from his embrace, moving over to the ashtray on the table and crushing out the last of her cigarette. She briefly hesitated, then promptly lit another with a semi-apologetic shrug. You should have seen the mess of him, Davy. He looked terrible, skin and bone. He's been taking that heroin. Colleen told me that she saw him in the Castor. She flung him out, Davy. He was stealing from her. Her rent money, her club money, with the profit. That's terrible, Davy said sadly, thinking of his own mother alone in that house in Cardinal, when Mark, on the couch in some dismal squat in a far-off city, which briefly flared with menace in his imagination before he converted that vision into a swish flat full of swinging metropolitan professionals. It just makes me glad that Mark's in London with Simon, away from that waster. But, Cathy's face creased into self-caricature that unnerved him. Colleen said that Mark was the same way. No, he's not that stupid. Cathy's eyes and mouth stretched, pulling the skin on her face taut. It sort of explains a lot, Davy. Davy Renton couldn't bear to hear this. It just couldn't be true. No, he shook his head in grey finality. Not our Mark. Colleen's just upset at what's happened to Spud. She wants to make our Mark a scapegoat. The lid grumbled, farted and rattled against the pot, and Cathy was over in the cooker, reducing the heat to give the stovies a stir. That was what I thought, Davy, but still, I mean, you know how secretive he is. She looked at him. It took him ages, she could tell, about packing in the university, and then there was that girl that he was seeing. Davy gripped the windowsill, leant forward, felt the pressure in his tense shoulders as he looked wistfully outside. He spoke to the ghostly reflection. I used to think that if you brought shame on the house, it'd be through getting a lassie pregnant or something. I never thought it would be drugs. I know. Sometimes it just seems a bit weird. Sometimes. Cathy pushed out some smoke from her lungs. I mean, that thing with wee Davy, that was twisted. I can see it's an awful thing to say about your own flesh and blood, and I love him to bits and was proud when he went to university, but Davy rested his forehead against the cool glass pane. He recalled his last conversation with Mark, his tones high and distressed, telling his son that they were planning to shut the door on the working classes in education, how it was his last chance for people like him to get a degree without being in the hock of the banks for the rest of their lives. Mark had just kept repeating, aye, in his crudely stuffed clothes into a holdall, then came out with his usual nonsense about starting a band in London, just like the last time you went there. That punk rock site's shite's to blame. It's that rubbish that turned his head, Davy Renton mused, turning from the window, recounting the proposition he put to his son. Tear everything down? Aye, fair enough. But what are you going to put in its place? Drugs, Cathy cried. That's what's putting in its place. Davy shook his head. I can't see it, but Kath, he's in London with Simon. They're both going to be starting on the boat soon. They'll not let junkies on a boat, Kath. Do you want someone who's hallucinating on heroin, shooting up that LSD or whatever they call it, talking to pink elephants all day with them trying to sail a boat? No way. This is the sea. There'll be no tolerance for that sort of thing at sea, Cathy. They have tests for that sort of thing. Now it's just that daft bloody hash. It makes him dopey with his bloody brain and no. You think so? Aye, of course I do. He's not that stupid. So that just kind of shows you how, Irvine writes the lack of knowledge that the parents have. That at that time, heroin was kind of new, as it were, in the early to mid 70s, and this is about 10 years later. So the lack of knowledge, lack of understanding about drugs, how addiction works and such, but also a belief that Mark will do right. Because Mark's in London, he's away from the drugs, he's away from the horribleness that's happening, because Scotland and Leith and that is their only world. They haven't gone beyond that, and they don't realise that Mark has actually gone to an epicenter of that kind of world. And I do love how with this chapter, as I said, it's quite different because it is third person, is from the parents' perspective, but at the same time, Irving uses things like the crust on the china that the dad is trying to scrub away, but he's having tough time doing, to relate to what is going on with Mark and the heroin. I love Irving's writing. Just as with Trainspotting, just as with Filth, a lot of it is written in Scottish dialect, so like that I kind of fumble my way through it because I still find it a bit hard to read and such out loud, but I got through it, and it's exactly the same with this book. And big chunks of it are in Scottish dialect and such, and Scottish slang. But I really did enjoy it. I think I preferred Trainspotting, if I'm honest, between the two. But the way it's constructed, the way that he builds these backstories, the way I understand the characters now, which I didn't before, I really appreciated it. So yeah, I think overall, I liked it. So, Skagboys, would I read this again? I think I definitely would, but what I'd like to do is read Porno, aka T2, the sequel first, and then maybe go back through the trilogy of books, and then that way I can go from the beginning right through the end, rather than what I've done where I've gone from the middle to the beginning, and then it will be the end when I get round to reading Porno. So I think I need to fully understand and go right the way through. Would I read any more Irvine Welsh books? Well, hell yes, and I've got more of them upstairs. So I am going to be reading more Irvine Welsh. He's extremely dark, but I love him. Would I recommend this to anyone? Yes, I would, but I would give a trigger warning, especially for this one, just because of certain elements. I mean, Filth is probably darker, but I didn't give trigger warning for Filth or Trainspotting, but maybe that was because people were already in the middle of their issues. Let me put it that way. I'm just trying to say it in a way without giving any spoilers. They're already in the midst of their issues, whereas this one, it's the build up to the midst of the issues, and so there are some things which we see, which from someone's perspective is really takes them aback, but then when they see similar or worse stuff in Trainspotting, because they've already gone down such a dark road, it's nothing to them. I think that's the difference. So yeah, I feel like this one is probably a bit more triggering than those two books, even those two books are darker because of where characters are. I know that sounds weird, but there we go, that's what my brain is saying. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it to others. So then my thoughts on Skagboys by Irvine Welsh, a really raw, gritty, powerful book with a lot of personal moments in it. It felt very personal, and it was a great thing to read during my time off from work throughout the Literature Festival. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Skagboys. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comments box below, or give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely up to you, like you said. And I'll be back with my thoughts on the next book I'm reading, which is A Discovery of Witches. A nice chunky book, but I have a feeling, look, even though it's chunky, that is big print. So I have a feeling I'm going to get through this probably quite quickly. So I'll see where I am in a week's time, and if I have to take a bit longer, I have to take a bit longer. But yeah, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you when I finish Discovery, which is book 1, shall I say. Book 1, because there's 3 books, but this is just book 1. So I'll be back then. Bye!